Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, for pricing. Today we are discussing the Jaeger-LeCoultre Polaris Mariner Date. In 1968, the definitive Polaris diving alarm with this style of dial debuted, and then in 2018 the Polaris was revived as a full-time collection with a full range of options. In late 2020, for the 2021 model year, JLC launched this watch, the Mariner Date. In steel, it's 42 millimeters in diameter by 14 millimeters thick from lug tip to lug tip. It is 48.7 millimeters. And then if we are to measure across the wrist the actual rigid end lengths of the bracelet, it's actually 55 millimeters across the wrist. So 48.7, just the case. 55 if we include the incompressible outer links of the bracelet. So it's got a broad stance across the wrist and a 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll throw it on my wrist. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, and it does fit. That said, the way the bracelet wears, I'm going to recommend this watch for a wrist my size or larger, because it is going to flare out and it is going to fight, and if your wrist is much smaller, you're going to have some uncomfortable end link overlap. It is not terribly thick, though 14 doesn't sound thin because of the way the case and the crystal are shaped. It should slide easily underneath a dress cuff. Taking a look at the bracelet, it's integrated into the case shape, so it has a conforming end length that matches the slope of the legs, but also the curve of the barrel of the case. We have a combination of polished primary links and then satin finished intermediates, and in a sign of good taste, you can see JLC actually beveled the edges of the intermediates to give it just a little bit more shine and detail. Now, the bracelet is actually fixed in place using pin sleeves, so if you want to size this at home, you're going to need a block and a punch, but JLC has given you many removable links, so you're going to get the right size. There's also a roughly 2.5 millimeter tool-free adjustment built in on each side. It's a lot like Rolex's EasyLink tool-free system, and you just pull it out and you snap it out or you snap it back in. So you have a total of 5 millimeters of side-to-side adjustment using just these incremental sizing steps, these little quick adjusts. It's actually a double deployant with a quad trigger release, so you better believe this thing is staying shut. A little block at the center contains the little spring-loaded pin snaps that lock it closed. A very secure system. You can see the JL logo externally, and the clasp, like the rest of the bracelet, features a judicious blend of satin and polish for contrast. So does the case. The case is marketed as a Polaris, but back in the 1960s, it was marketed by many brands as the Irvin Piquerez Super Compressor. Now, what was unique about the Polaris version and also the Vulcan Cricket was that instead of 2 crowns, they would have had 3, one for setting the alarm. Well, because this is the Polaris Date, we've got 2 crowns, one of which features the original Super Compressor's crown for adjusting the internal rotating dive bezel. This is a 60-click internal rotating bezel. You just rotate your hand. There's a ratcheting system so it can't move backwards. And then you line it up. You can see it's got a lovely little orange sort of lacquered profile on the collar of the crown, so you know when it's out. You don't accidentally try to dive with it still out. The funny thing here is that the standard crown is not a screw down, but I guess it doesn't need to be because of the way the seals are designed. It is 300 meters, water resistant, and I only regret that JLC no longer lists the correct conversion between 300 meters and feet on its dial, but we'll forgive them because even Rolex does this. Taking a quick look, you can see that the watch has plenty of lume, and the minute hand is instantly distinguishable from the rest of the dial because of the use of differential lume colors, so you can quickly read it against the bezel to time your dive. You can also see, even though it's not running right now, that the seconds hand is also lumed, so you know if your watch is running at night. Now you can see the shape of the indices and the fonts for the numerals, the exact same as used on the definitive version of the Polaris diving alarm, the 1968 to 1970 E859 model. What this has, that one didn't have, is a beautiful dial with different layers of lacquer and brushed finishing and granular texture. And so we have this sort of gloss blue outboard that's dark and sort of a navy blue, maybe a little bit lighter, maybe aged ultramarine. And then you can see as we get to the inner dial, we have these lovely applique indices and numerals, but then we also have this granular dial below the level of the lacquer, and we also have a gradient that starts to lighten up as it approaches the seconds track inboard. And then we have a discate center that features another gradient or vignette smoked profile in blue lacquer. It is quite attractive, and you can see we have those high polished rhodium-coated steel hands for contrast during the day. The watch does look a lot like the Polaris diving alarm, and I always find that a diving bezel is a great alternative to a chronograph, because I rarely time anything with a chronograph that's more than an hour long. A dive bezel is easier to read, and it doesn't have the downstream service costs of a chronograph. The watch does include a JLC-899AB reference movement, which is a unidirectional automatic winder with ceramic rotor bearings for low maintenance and high efficiency. It packs a 70-hour power reserve, which is a significant upgrade over previous 899s, which were about 30 hours power reserve. So we have a big upgrade there. Now, the watch, of course, has some subsidiary setting modes. The subsidiary modes are hacking or stop seconds, so you can set the watch to a reference time. And then there's also a quick set, so you can rapidly set the date. And if you take a look, particularly look at the 3, JLC used the same font on the dial for all the numerals that it uses on the date disc, which is something that a lot of brands often overlook. Whereas the original Polaris would not have featured a display case back. Heck, even the 2008 Tribute to Polaris did not feature a display case back. Here you get it. You can actually see that 899 in there. You'll also note it goes through the Master 1000 hours control. All JLC movements, except the Caliber 101 micro movement, have gone through the Master 1000 hours control since the year 2004. It's a test of chronometry, yes, but also winding efficiency, power reserve, shock resistance, water resistance, and overall durability. And unlike the COSC's 2-week test, this lasts 1,000 hours. You can see the architecture of the movement. It's a 32-joule unidirectional automatic winder. It's got a 4 hertz beat rate, or 8 beats per second. Take a look. You can see that the balance is free-sprung for precision of adjustment and also shock tolerance, which is better with a free-sprung balance than with a mobile stud index. We have both polished and fire-blued screws here, and although the movement is mostly mechanically finished, JLC movements still all include a small amount of hand finishing, regardless of the model or the price point. Of course, all of this is water resistant down to 30 bars or 300 meters. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.